Hello and welcome back to my shop. Thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to take another look at this router sled that I've built. I made this a couple of months ago for a very specific project. I was making an epoxy river table and I needed a way to flatten the slabs. Now it did a great job in that the table turned out very flat. I was very happy with that. There was a couple of areas that this could use some improvement on. So today we're going to take a look at that and we're going to make some upgrades. The two issues I had were dust collection and the height adjustment. Now for the dust collection, when I built this, I set it up for a shop vac hose simply because the 2.5-inch shop vac hose is easier to deal with than a 4-inch hose from a dust collector. For a small project, that's probably just fine, but when I got into a full-size table, the dust was just too much for the shop vac. It was overwhelmed really quickly. The dust was going everywhere. It was getting in the bearings, making this very hard to use. So we're going to make some upgrades to that. And then with the router, the issue I had was the height adjustment. With this particular router, fully plunged, the bit sticks out about 3/4 of an inch below my plate. Now when you set this up, your plate needs to have about a 1/2-inch gap between your material and the plate so that your chips have room to fly around under there, which only left me with about a 1/4 inch of material that I could take out of any given slab. And if that wasn't enough, I found myself taking off everything I could. I'd have to change out these mounting blocks to a thinner block so that I could take out the rest. So I've got an upgrade for that as well. So let's take a look.
We're going to start with disassembling the carriage. Really the only thing we're going to reuse here is the aluminum angles.
One of the upgrades we're going to make today is installing this new router. I just bought this on Amazon, so do me a favor and let's not tell my wife about this. Just not yet anyways. I went with a Triton router for a few reasons. One, it's a 3.25 horsepower motor, which makes me more comfortable stepping up to a 3-inch bit. Also, in comparison to my old Porter cable, it plunges really deep. Once I install this on my jig and I fully plunge the router, the bit's going to hang a good 1.5 inches below my plate. What that means for me is that even when I set up my jig a 1/2 inch above my workpiece, I have a solid inch of material removal that I can do before having to reset the jig. And for any given slab that I'm trying to flatten, that's going to be more than plenty. The bit I'm going to be upgrading to is this 3-inch Spoilboard bit. This one uses removable inserts, and these inserts each have 4 cutting edges. Once one edge is dull, you just turn it and use the next edge. Once all 4 edges are dull, you just throw it away and install a new insert. One thing I'd highly recommend is using Loctite on the threads so that when this is in use, the screw can't come loose and have the insert come flying off and hit you.
Now we're going to cut some plywood to accommodate the new router and the larger dust collection hose. We're going to take the base plate off of this router. This will give us a perfect template to use when we're making the new carriage. Now we're just going to lay out where we're going to drill holes for the router and for the dust collection. For the router, I'm using a 3-inch hole saw. This will allow my 3-inch bit to slip through. And for the dust collection, I'm using a 4-inch hole saw. Now using the router plate as my guide, I'm going to mark all the holes with a self-centering bit, and then I'm going to countersink with a Forstner bit, and then I'll drill all the way through. This Triton router happens to use 1/4-20 screws for attaching the plate to the router, so I'm just going to use some 1/4-20 furniture bolts to attach my carriage to the router. On the day I decided to do this, I went to my local big box store to pick up some dust collection accessories, and they really didn't have much. So I'm just taking this 4-inch coupler, and I'm going to cut it up and make it work. I'm going to wrap all 4 sides with some bristles to assist with the dust collection. I was not able to find these at any local big box stores, but they were pretty inexpensive on Amazon. We're just going to attach with some 1/4-inch crown staples. Having the bristles on the side of the carriage makes lining up my aluminum angles just a little more tricky. My carriage is 3/4 inch plywood and my aluminum angles are 2 inch. So I ripped a piece of wood to 1.25 inches, and I'll use that as a guide to line up my angles. Drilling through those nylon bristles, they really do melt and stick to your drill bit, so you're going to have to clean that off every once in a while. Now I'll attach the carriage to the router using some 1/4 furniture bolts. The new carriage is wider than the old carriage, so we're going to have to remove these stiffeners and replace them. Now I'm going to attach this new carriage to the rails, and then I'll get some measurements and make up some new stiffeners. I'm just going to cut a couple of pieces out of the same plywood I used for the carriage. Now these bristles are actually going to come in contact with my stiffener, which will act as a good stop. I just need to set it right so that my 3-inch bit doesn't impact my rails. I cut my plywood to match the length that the rails overhang, and then I'm actually going to cut a notch out to accommodate the carriage. I did it this way to add as much lateral strength as I can. The stiffer the rails are, the smoother the entire machine is going to operate. Then I just attach my stiffeners with 3/4 inch screws, using the carriage to make sure that the spacing is correct. And then just attach the dust collection hose with a screw clamp.
So now we've got a new router sled mostly completed. I've got a new router installed on a new carriage. I added bristles and a 4-inch collection hose. The one thing I want to try to do yet is find a way to manage this hose. That 4-inch hose is probably going to be in the way as I'm using it, and I'd like to get it out of the way. So I have an idea. I'm going to try hanging some cables from the ceiling with some pulleys and see if we can get this thing out of the way. Let's take a look at that.
To start, I located a truss, and I'm going to pre-drill and install some eyelets to attach my cables to. I just make my loops with some simple cable clamps. Then I'm going to attach it from anchor to anchor, and I'm going to install a turnbuckle also so I can tighten the cable. And then I use the same clamps to tie up the hose, but I think I'm going to switch that out and use some carabiners so it's a little quicker to detach.
All right, so now the sled moves freely in every direction. The hose is up and out of the way. We have an upgraded dust collection system, and the new router is going to allow me to use a larger bit and plunge deeper so that I shouldn't have to reset the jig when I'm flattening the slab. If you'd like a more detailed video on how I built this jig, I'll leave a link in the description below to my previous video. I'll also leave links to any of the products that I've used here. You should know that I am not sponsored in any way. Everything was purchased with my own money. But if you do use those links, you'll get the same price you would otherwise, but I'll make a small commission on that. If you liked the video, if this helped you in any way, I ask that you please like and subscribe. And as always, even if it didn't, I ask that you please like and subscribe. Stay tuned for my next video. I've got another big project coming up and we're going to put this thing to work.